Hello, everyone. Welcome to Promethean Action's live question and answer show. Today is December 4th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm joined today with the lovely Susan Kokinda of Promethean Action and Barbara Boyd of Promethean Pack. Very happy you guys are going to join, that you've joined us today. We'd like to give a thank you, happy Thanksgiving to all of our American viewers. The world has been, there's been no stoppage of world events since the holiday season here. We hope you had a great meeting with your family and friends over the past week or so. And we're also, as everyone knows, we're coming into the holiday season. So we hope everyone's doing well. So as the stream is warming up here, as everyone's joining, why don't you let us know where you're watching in the chat for a few minutes here, and then we're going to get started with the questions. Okay. Yeah, we're going to take that. So thank you, Evelyn. I already see your question. I have it lined up, and we're going to ask that one. I agree. Trump needs to stop the trash language, even if it's true. Okay. Good morning to the Dream Team. Thank you, Melody Hart. Welcome. X.com. Thank you, Melody, for the support. And our supporters on X here, I see one. England. We have so much support from England and the UK, actually all the English-speaking world, Canada, Australia. We have a great question from New Zealand. Thank you for your support and also for tuning in on X.com. I just actually launched my X.com profile literally this week, so I'll flash that up a little bit later if you want to follow me on X. Merry Christmas from Los Angeles. Welcome. Snowy Colorado Springs. Welcome, Taylor. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Ohio, Charleston, West Virginia, Southwest Michigan. Hello from Alberta, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Hey, grew up in Philadelphia. Welcome from Bucks County. West Virginia. Oh, I love West Virginia so much. Alabama. Okay, so what I wanted to start with is actually something that Susan mentioned on our Wednesday show. So Trump, I wanted to make sure that everyone saw this because we kind of did a little bit of a mistake in the show. I think everyone can see that. Yep, here we go. So the Trump administration just launched this website here. I don't know if it has an official name. It's just called Investments. And it's actually something that we've done on this show. It's something that we've wanted before, which is actually a list of all of the investments that Trump has raised to be brought into the United States here. It doesn't have it listed by state per se, but it does have it listed by industry, the amount and what the investment is coming in for. So if you're interested in checking this out, let me pull it up. It's whitehouse.gov/investments. Let me just pull that up on the screen here real quick. So you can check this one out if you want to. There we go. So this one here is whitehouse.gov/investments. And this was literally just put up, I think it was just a few days before Susan gave her, it's 10-second timer. Let me put it up again. We put the wrong URL in the show on Wednesday, so this is the proper URL, and you should definitely check it out here. And there's actually one more that Trump put up. We actually talked about this too, but not as much. Another one that Trump brought up was this. Let me share this other tab. Here, this media offenders. So now Trump is directly on the White House here pulling. So he did this whole thing here.
Adam, we're not seeing anything.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so the other one here is, he calls it the media offenders, but so they're updating it.
You can refuse illegal orders.
What I have on here is a whole write-up on the whole seditious six thing, including some of the details and talking points. And he brings in more of the context. So I believe this is being, and you can see all the claims here. So when you're talking to your crazy family members and crazy friends, this is another resource that that the White House just released. So let me just throw this one up on your screen here too. This, you can go to whitehouse.gov/media bias. So these two websites, the media offenders and the new investments websites, are the two resources that the White House has now given us to help organize people around these issues. So I want to now open up. Now that the stream's warmed up, I want to open this up to Barbara and Susan. That we're going to open with are obviously what's going on with the Russian peace negotiations, and then we're going to have a floor discussion of Venezuela and the war on drugs. So I don't know who's going to take it up from here.
Barbara can start.
Okay. This is kind of like the leading news of the morning. And really, as you look at it, it is the reason for the seditious six. And really kind of an insane Democratic Party drive to start impeachment proceedings even before the president has been in office for 10 months. You had Senator Mark Warner yesterday, who led the Russiagate stuff back in 2016, saying that the military is going to come forward and actually help us get rid of this president. He said that directly yesterday, which is a direct call from the Democratic side of the Senate Intelligence Committee to actually impeach the president. The reason for this furor, which very few people really understand, is twofold. One is what Susan's going to go into in terms of the war on the globalists and the war on forever wars. And I'm going to talk about what's really going on with Venezuela. What is the issue with Venezuela? What is the issue with Honduras? And I'm going to start with Adam, if you could actually bring up the Trump war on drugs first slide. Slide 2. All right. On March 13th, 1985, in an address to a conference in Mexico City, Lyndon LaRouche published a 15-point war plan on drug trafficking. And here was his first point. The international drug traffic has become an evil and powerful government in its own right. It represents today a financial, political, and military power greater than that of entire nations within the Americas. It is a government which is making war against civilized nations, a government upon which we must declare war, a war which we must fight with the weapons of war, and a war which we must win in the same spirit the United States fought for the unconditional defeat of Nazism between 1941 and 1945. That's not how people have actually thought about this. It is, I believe, the way the president is thinking about it. That was 40 years ago. Since that time, this nation, you can call it all sorts of names, the deep state, the devil's legions, as some people call it, the decrepit and corrupt elite. It's all organized around black money. It's now metastasized into an empire which not only includes drugs which kill people, as the president actually put out in a social media post this morning. I'm trying to stop the poisoning of America. It is what is behind human trafficking. It's what is behind the modern slave trade of immigrant labor throughout the world being driven into, something far worse even than the original slave trade. And it's that which Trump is waging a war against, starting with the countries in our own hemisphere. That's why I believe he started out his campaign and his original thing by saying, let's have Canada become part of the United States. Why would that be? Why would he say that? It's because Canada has served as a tool of this particular empire. It's who opened up the entire Bahamas and everything else to drug money laundering through the Canadian banking system. Why is he so fixed on Alaska? Because what we're trying to do is to create a clean zone in our own hemisphere where this enemy is actually defeated. Could you come to slide 3?
I'm pretty certain you can switch it to, Barbara.
Okay, all right. So he goes on to say, the mandate given to law enforcement forces deployed in support of this war must be the principle that collaboration with the drug traffic or with the financier or political forces of the international drug traffickers is treason in a time of war. And in his 11th point, he emphasizes the primary objective is military in nature, to destroy the quasi-enemy state, the international drug trafficking interest, by destroying or confiscating the quasi-state's economic and financial resources, and by detaining as prisoners of war or as traitors and spies all persons aiding the drug trafficking interest. Again, this was 40 years ago. It didn't happen. It has now metastasized into everything which people have been talking about as killing our nation. It's not just fentanyl. It's not just coke. It's the modern form of marijuana, which is creating psychosis. It's not just, isolated instances of child trafficking. This is the primary means by which these criminal organizations actually make their millions of dollars in monies at this point. Human trafficking of the worst sort, a modern slave trade. And this is what President Trump has now gone after. And it's part of the reason, along with what Susan is going to talk about, why there is a war going on and why the entire internet is now taken up with ways of diverting you from actually thinking about this war and the war which Susan's going to talk about. Or Susan, you want to go ahead and talk about the second thing? I should mention at this point, which I have to, is, Promethean Action and Promethean Pact have nothing to do with Helga Zeppel-Rouge or any of the organizations associated with her. In fact, we differ on exactly this point as to what Donald Trump is doing. You're muted.
Adam, I think we can actually start with some of the first questions on Ukraine.
All righty here. Let's see on stage. First question from Maria Selman. My question is, how can Ukraine delete a major portion of Trump's 20-point peace plan, which calls for an audit of the billions the U.S. has given to Ukraine? I read that Zelensky removed this from Trump's peace plan. Thank you, Maria, for your question.
Well, let me take a step back and address it from the standpoint of what is going on, because obviously there is a negotiating process, and the Ukrainians, but in particular their European warmongering enforcers, are trying to keep this thing going. But I think Ukraine is in a very, very weakened position at this point. And what we saw on Tuesday in Moscow, where you had simultaneously the U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, along with Jared Kushner, meeting for 5 hours with Vladimir Putin, not only on the particular strategic and political details of a Ukraine peace treaty, but also extensive discussions on economic cooperation. At the same time in Moscow, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was meeting with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, again talking about economic policy. Now, I pointed to the strategic optics of this without coming to the firm conclusion that this was coordinated. Some of our friends out there on YouTube are saying they believe it was coordinated, that is, for the United States and China to be in Russia at the same time. But the overall dynamic in the world right now is one in which the three major superpowers are operating from the standpoint of a completely different playbook than the globalist or British geopolitical playbook of the entire post-war era. Now, Adam, if you could share the screen. Adam, can you share the screen? For my slideshow. There we go. To put this in the proper context, people should go to the White House website. You should be spending more time, by the way, on the White House website than doom scrolling. But this is a statement that the White House put out on the anniversary of the Monroe Doctrine, which was just 2 days ago, December 2nd. And I'm going to read this because this is the only way to properly understand what the Trump administration is doing in the world. It says on December 2nd, 1823, the doctrine of American sovereignty was immortalized in prose when President James Monroe declared before a nation a simple truth that has echoed throughout the ages. The United States will never waver in the defense of our homeland, our interests, or the well-being of our citizens. Today, my administration proudly reaffirms the promise of the new Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, that the American people, not foreign nations nor globalist institutions, will always control their own destiny in our hemisphere. And I would also suggest internationally as well. Marco Rubio echoed this very powerfully in the White House cabinet meeting 2 days ago, where he said that the president operates from this simple principle. Is it good for the United States? And he said, basically, that should be a no-brainer. But of course, it hasn't been, because as this document says, it's been foreign nations or globalist institutions that have set our foreign policy. So to get back to what is happening in terms of Ukraine, it's very clear since at least the Alaska summit between Trump and Vladimir Putin that the real dynamic for negotiations has been between the United States and Russia. The Europeans are doing everything in their power, have been doing everything in their power to sabotage it. And so, of course, Zelensky, to answer Maria's question, of course, Zelensky is going to try and hold some kind of ground in terms of knocking sections out of the negotiating package and so on. But they are in incredibly weakened position. The Ukrainians, as Barbara has documented in her shows, the Ukrainians are incredibly weak because the US FBI has been behind the corruption investigations in Ukraine, who have knocked out Zelensky's primary figures. And I will say that even the Europeans are pretty much admitting, the more sober ones. I mean, let's put it this way. You have two groupings in the world of the establishment. You have the people who will stop at nothing, including probably blowing up the world, to try and maintain their global imperial elite. And then you have another section which is maybe a little bit more rational and realizing maybe the jig is up right now and we're going to have to regroup. So just in the past couple of days, I would say the realists, not that they're good guys, but the realists have been sort of saying, all right, we really don't hold the cards. So share the screen again, Adam. This is the German foreign minister admitting that Ukraine is going to have to make painful concessions to achieve peace. You know, unlike the British and the French, who are the most insane at this point, here you have somebody who is saying, oops, again, maybe the jig is up. And even Chatham House, which is the mouthpiece of the British geopolitical elite, did a piece a couple of days ago that, Europe's going to have to throw some more money into this somehow if we want to have a say in what comes next in Ukraine. Again, a de facto admission that they really do not hold the cards. You can take that down. We don't need to pollute the screen with Chatham House all that much any longer. So again, the critical dynamic in the world today is sovereign nations, and in terms of the United States and Ukraine, it's in terms of the Ukraine negotiations, it's the United States and Russia. Some are saying the Chinese were also discussing helping resolve the Ukraine crisis in the meeting in Moscow. That remains to be seen, but it's certainly not out of the question. And so I would encourage people not to get caught up in the day-to-day minutia of how these negotiations are going, but recognize the dynamic in the world is one which is completely different than it was before Donald Trump returned to office this last January.
Thank you, Susan and Barbara. So we already are getting some good questions in the chat here. I want to take this first one here from Ice Wendigo because it's on topic. Trump's peace plan will not be accepted by Russia. It is not in their interest to leave Ukraine with a 600,000 army. NATO will simply attack Russia again. Susan, Barbara.
Barbara, you want to give your take on that? You're muted.
Susan just said, don't jump to conclusions just yet, okay? And, obviously Russia's position is very clear. We are going to meet the objectives we set out, 3-4 years ago in the special operation, which is the Donbass, Crimea, all of whom have held elections saying they want to be part of Russia, are going to be part of Russia. That's the land that we've actually conquered. There's a small area of the Donbass which still remains, in which the Trump plan says has to go to Russia. And this is, basically the hard line. Ukraine has to be denazified and made neutral. What does that mean? It means that the criminal gangs which actually run the place and changed the election results when Zelensky was originally elected on a peace plan. That was what he promised to do in his election, and he's actually canceled all elections since. Essentially what Russia is going to take a hard line about is what is our security interest here. You guys told us when the Soviet Union fell apart that you would not advance NATO eastward, and you have done so. Specifically and with Ukraine as the pincers to actually attack Russia. That situation has to end. We're not going to tolerate that on our borders, as we are not tolerating it on our borders either now, finally. We're actually engaging in something akin to national defense against drugs, against terrorism, against everything else coming from our own hemisphere here. So this will play out one way or the other. As Trump has said, I told Zelensky, you don't have the cards. Now he chose to actually take a different course. And now he didn't say it yesterday, but you're losing land at a very rapid rate, including the Donbass, which will be conquered one way or the other. If you continue in this nonsense, then Russia's going to go on to Odessa. And if you look at a map, that's exactly what would be the logical next step. Russia has no intention of waging war with Europe or taking all of Ukraine. That's what most people don't understand about the battle lines here, which were set when we, unfortunately, joined in a British coup in 2014 to overthrow the elected government of Ukraine. And when Ukraine started, in essence, at our direction, at direction of the British, a civil war with the Donbass. They went in to exterminate all the Russian people in the Donbass, and that's been the source of tension ever since. So Russia's going to be very firm on this, and one way or the other, Ukraine is going to have to basically accede to those original objectives. So that's why I'd leave it. And Putin is quite willing and has been all along to negotiate.
And I'll just add, just in terms of, the nuances of negotiations, I was participating in discussions with some other analysts the other day, and they made the point that the proposed peace treaty talks about 600,000 military personnel. And they made the point that that could be 50,000 combat ready and the rest of personnel or reserves. So that's why I'm saying, don't get caught up in the minutia. There's a lot of negotiating going on and a lot of maneuvering room. What always counts, the only thing that counts, is what is the intention? Trump's intention is to stop the war. The British, globalist, European intention is to keep it going. So what is driving these forces and Russia's intention is both to stop the war, and as Barbara said, see to its legitimate security interests, which NATO has been eating away at for decades and decades. So once you start from the standpoint of the intentions, you're not, again, going to get caught up in terms of every variation of how the negotiations are going.
Thank you, Susan and Barbara. If you're just tuning in, please drop a like on the stream. I see we have about 1,200 people watching us live here on YouTube with about 400 or 500 likes. Please just give us a quick like. It helps boost our visibility on YouTube while we do it. Smash the like button. And I want to give a quick shout out here to Beverly. Thank you very much for your support. My husband and I are founders of our country's Committee of Safety. Look up the historical perspectives on COS. For the last 4 years in Wisconsin, I'm a former Uper. Could you speak to our audience in person or via Zoom? Please reach out to us, Beverly. I don't know if I remember getting an email about this from you. Please reach out to us. We would be happy to speak to your audience there.
Especially since you're a former Uper. Where my heart is.
So thank you very much for your support. And everyone, this is our, if you're tuning in for the first time, this is our live question and answer show. We do this every Thursday. We have 3 political briefings a week. We have one on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And on Thursday, we do this live question and answer show. Most of the questions here that we're going to be bringing up, like you see here, these questions are primarily coming from our email subscribers. So in our email newsletter, I put the link to ask a question in multiple of the emails throughout the week. So that's where these questions are coming from. If you're interested in getting our free newsletter, you can click the link is in the description, or you can search the web for Promethean Action, or you can just go to prom.ac. Our newsletter is completely free. We're going to send you an email a day. We have so much to say. We're going to send you an email a day, but we promise they're full of value and you're always going to learn something new. So you can get our free newsletter at the link in the description, or you can just search the web for Promethean Action. We have good SEO, so it should show up pretty easily. Okay, so I'm going to switch here real quick to back to the questions from our newsletter here. So the first one here that I read before, but we should probably revisit this. I read that Zelensky removed the audit that was supposed to happen for all the billions that we gave to Ukraine. And I'm going to roll that into the second question here, which is similar. Thank you, Jenia. How is Trump's economic revolution connected to the Ukraine peace talks? And this was a video that we did recently on our political updates. So Barbara and Susan, how is Trump's economic revolution, what he's trying to do here in the United States, how is that connected to the Ukrainian peace talks?
Well, it's fundamental because for Trump, for Putin, and I think increasingly for Xi Jinping, there's really no difference between the strategic situation and the economic situation. In the entire post-war period, we've been dominated by this globalist outlook, which maintains its control by creating perpetual wars. We don't need to, number them off on our fingers. There have been all too many since the end of World War II. Why? So that a global financier elite can maintain their control over the world. So you have to look at Trump's strategic offensive in terms of ending these wars, of which he's ended 8, and now we're working on number 9. And, off on the side, I think he's trying to end the war in Sudan as well. To take away the strategic flank that the globalists use to maintain their power. And then the economic corollary for this is sovereign nations working with each other for mutual economic development. Now, if you look at the peace talks, there's 2 elements to it. Obviously, there are major discussions going on between the United States and Russia for joint economic projects like the Bering Straits Tunnel, which would have an enormous impact on the entire planet, linking up the continents and allowing for vastly expanded economic cooperation. Think of the raw materials and rare earths in the Siberian regions of Russia and so on, and the ability to immediately access that into the Western Hemisphere in terms of building up our manufacturing economy. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is this absolutely brilliant proposal, which I suspect came from the administration in talks with the Russians, that you take the Russian funds that have been seized by the Europeans. Now, it may be the case that the Europeans have already embezzled some of those funds, which may be where some of their hysteria comes from. But take these seized assets of the Russians, put them in U.S. hands, and use them to rebuild Ukraine. I mean, that's the kind of brilliant strategic thinking, which will ultimately benefit Russia, because ultimately they want a stable, economically prosperous Ukraine that they can trade with, as well as trading with everybody else. So it's a very good question. I appreciate it, because it really gets to the core of the way Trump thinks and the way we think, which is that there's no difference between strategic policy and economic policy. There's a very simple dividing line in the world, as that Monroe Doctrine said, between globalists, global financial institutions, and sovereign nations. And those principles inform everything Trump is doing.
Thank you, Susan. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question. Have any historical color revolutions been thwarted? If so, how? If not, why not? Thank you, Eric, for your question. I thought about this one for a little bit. I think we're in the middle of trying to thwart one right now in the United States. I know that.
Well, if you actually think about it, the American Revolution thwarted a color revolution. Here we were trying to actually become economically self-sufficient, and every aspect of our economic life was shut down by the British Crown, and by force of arms, they basically tried to organize an insurrection from within to mean that the United States would cease to exist as anything other than a colony. That's a pretty good thwarting of a color revolution. And Lincoln's Civil War, I believe, is actually another pretty good thwarting of a major color revolution. Once again, if you actually study your history, you'll find that the Confederacy was largely a invention, not of some kind of permanent genetic problem with Americans in terms of racism, but it actually was a color revolution conducted largely by the British Crown to try and take the United States back. The elements of that, which are very, very important to think about, is that it all depended upon a population being educated and activated at a very, very high level, and being able to think in such a way strategically that the soldier, the individual soldier in any part of our nation became capable of actually waging war at the level of a general. And that's the kind of thing which we're actually trying to accomplish today, because people keep saying, well, Trump can't do it all himself. That is very, very true. But, you know, people have to sort of stop being spectators, get out of that world that'll kill you, and actually get into the world of putting yourself in the president's shoes and constantly thinking, how would I deal with this situation strategically, and comparing it to what the president is doing and what is working and what isn't. Put yourself on the stage of history. Don't be like Shakespeare's Hamlet, constantly complaining because you're an underling. And that's what it depends on.
And I want to give an example, not of a color revolution that was thwarted, but which was undone. And I want to address this because we're going to come to that subject perhaps a little bit later in some of the questions. There was a color revolution in Egypt where the Egyptian government was overthrown by the Muslim Brotherhood with Obama very much supporting this Muslim Brotherhood coup in Egypt. But that was overturned by the Egyptian military, by the Egyptian people, and the Muslim Brotherhood. I think the first country in the world to ban the Muslim Brotherhood was Egypt. Now, Egypt, and the reason I bring this up, and again, I think we'll get to this later, Egypt is largely a Muslim country. So for all of you out there who want to say all Muslims are out to overthrow all governments and create a caliphate and kill all Christians, I would ask you to just be a little bit more reflective. The Muslim Brotherhood is an arm of British intelligence. It represents radical political extremist Islam, which is a tool of the British. And the first government to ban the Muslim Brotherhood was the Muslim government of Egypt. So just remember that.
Thank you, Susan and Barbara. Okay, I want to give a quick shout out here from BSV Maximus. Thank you for tuning in. I've seen you plenty of times here. Thank you for joining us. This is to Barbara and Susan. Have you read Anna Iverson's articles, which have been emailed to Promethean Action? She's sharing sharp takes on the Genius and Clarity Act and the Genesis mission. The Genesis mission, wasn't that to go back to the, am I mistaken, was that to go back to the moon again? I forget what the Genesis mission was. So have you guys heard of this person? Have you seen her articles?
I haven't. I don't know about Susan. We'll take a look at it. Generally, there's a whole lot of controversy right now about AI, which is what the Genesis mission is about. Basically the idea is we'll go into the national labs, we'll map out 7 or 8, basic breakthrough scientific areas that we need to actually make breakthroughs are for the progress of all humanity. Fusion energy being right at the top of the list in the Genesis project, okay? And the idea is we'll put AI into the national labs, will run AI to actually pose to, and using the data in the national labs of all the experiments which have been done scientifically in each of these areas across the world, and figure out whether we're missing anything as we pose questions to AI as to potential things which we're not seeing. I think it's sort of similar to what happened in a COVID, where they used AI to actually come up with other treatments other than what Pfizer and Moderna, et cetera, were actually offering us. So that's what I think it's about. I don't know what Anna Iverson says about it, but, we'll take a look at it.
Thank you. All right, quick, oops. Here, I want to say, this came in a few minutes ago, but I just wanted to address this again. As it stands, does Promethean Action want to see the filibuster terminated? I think we're all in agreement on it's time to terminate the filibuster and actually get on with making and enacting of laws in this country that we want enacted. So there's your answer, Jacqueline. Yes, we do want to see the filibuster terminated. Okay, so let's see here on the questions. I guess we'll just take the next one. Okay, this is the one on the Flynn networks, but it's also touches on Venezuela. It seems like nobody out there understands what Trump and the military are doing in Venezuela. but what's actually happening is one of the most important events in the last 20 years and explains how our elections have been stolen and so much more. The work of Patrick Brink, Sidney Powell, and General Flynn is fundamentally important, but everyone mainstream is ignoring it. So the person provides a link. We should all be discussing this, as this is the most important subject which will determine whether we have a free country or not. Thank you, Brad, for the question and comment. So Trump military in Venezuela, what's actually going on there? Is this the most important event of the last 20 years? Barbara.
It is, if you're talking about what I was talking about at the beginning of this show, which is what is Venezuela, what is Honduras. These are transportation links for the actual networks that I'm talking about, which is much bigger than, frankly, what Patrick Burns, Sidney Powell, and General Flynn are talking about. I don't doubt that Smartmatic and Lord Malik Brown, who is the guy who actually runs Smartmatic, played a significant role in rigging elections throughout the world. But I have not been that certain about what's actually going on with machines in the United States. I'm really kind of a overwhelm them with votes person. And I still think that the major thing that happened in the 2020 election had to do with mail-in ballots and straight up, mail-in fraud. But, I think that that's a subject which needs to be explored, most certainly, given what Smartmatic is, given its role, etc. As Patrick Byrne is a FBI informant who actually slept with Maria Butina. People don't actually think about that very much, but that was a key part of Russiagate. If the FBI instructed me to sleep with someone, believe me, I would walk. That to me is just simply not something I would consider doing, no matter what the hold they had over me were. I thought that, basically what happened in 2020, their work deteriorated in such a way that, they actually kind of got set up, to be blunt. We had some experience with that at the time. I'm not going to get into discussing it here because it's a whole other topic. But, I remain of the view that 2024, we overwhelmed them. And we did so by that thing we call political organizing. And I think you can look at a lot of things which we're going to be asked about today, like the effort to tear Turning Point apart after it played a very significant role in organizing the vote on that kind of strategic map. So that's how I'd leave the question.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, thank you everyone for tuning in. Please drop a like if you haven't yet already. That would be really helpful to the stream. And if you're tuning in for the first time, please subscribe if you like what you see. This is our live webcast question and answer show we do every Thursday morning. And we do 3 other political briefings a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. So give us a subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. All right, so I'm taking a look at the questions here. And I think this next question, here, let me just pull it up. So yes, Evelyn, we did take this question. We know this is upsetting a lot of people, but I think this is an important question to take on this issue of psyops and letting the media really twist up your brain here. What a week. Please start this program with all the good things Trump has done in our office for the entire year since January. I'm asking for this request because all the media seems to care about is that he used the word retard to describe Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. And he called a reporter stupid. The reporter probably was stupid. This is not how a person should respond to questions or treat people. Granted, the reporter and Walz did say stupid comments. Okay. Trump's reaction should be better. Also, the way I see it, Trump's top issues are Ukraine and Russia, Venezuela, immigration, and his words against the Somalis in Minnesota, FEMA, and all of his legal challenges. The vibe that the media is giving is that a civil war is coming, and the seditious six are not helping matters because they're adding fuel to the fire. Well, the media is never going to give you a good vibe. So I suggest you stop tracking the media to get a vibe, because the only vibe the media is going to give you is the one that you're experiencing. Okay. Trump needs to work on getting Americans jobs and getting college kids working when they graduate college. He really needs to work on the economy and making millionaires give back. Well, I think it's honestly, Evelyn, I don't think it's more than just making millionaires give back. I think we have to begin to see ourselves as a nation of millionaires and producers and entrepreneurs, instead of this idea of just, oh, they're not giving us back. No, we have to see ourselves in a much different way. So I want to open up this. I want Barbara and Susan to talk about this, how Trump uses a word like retard, and it just triggers people that intake a lot of media. So Barbara and Susan, what are your thoughts on this, please?
I mean, the most important thing about Donald Trump is he's not a politician. He's somebody who actually lives in the real world, and, he speaks his mind. And if that offends the snowflakes, so be it, and of course the media is going to continue to pump that up. But in terms of the latter part of your question, yesterday in my show, I recommended that people do one simple thing: watch Donald Trump's entire cabinet meeting from Tuesday. This was a master class in rebuilding the economy. Every single cabinet officer addressed critical elements of this. I mean, even Marco Rubio, not so much from the standpoint of economics, but from the standpoint of national sovereignty. And what struck me about that cabinet meeting was the degree to which these cabinet members are a team, that that they're working in an integrated way. You don't have commerce over here and labor over here. You don't have education over here and something over there. This is a team which is doing something unprecedented in at least the last 50 years, which is looking at the physical economy of the United States, the actual state of the economy, and saying, all right, what do we need to do to fix this? Not from the standpoint of some Keynesian formula or some free market, Friedmanite formula, or the rules-based international liberal order and so on. They're approaching it from the American system principle that the wealth of a nation is the growth of its physical economy and the upskilling of its workforce. And that cabinet meeting was a master class. So, I will second what Adam said. Stop listening to the media and spend more time paying attention to what Trump and his team are actually saying and doing.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Barbara, any comments on this?
No, I think what you and Susan said is completely adequate.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone, for the support. I am following all the questions. All right, so we're just going to move here to the next question. I was just looking through and seeing if there's one I want to take right now. Let me move to the next one. I think it'll be a good switch. Okay, this is from Maria. Thank you very much, Maria, for your question. Now that President Trump is bringing so many jobs back, is there a sufficient qualified workforce available? I'm curious how this is playing out. I think generally the answer is no. Right, this country has concerned itself with the consumer economy for at least the last 30, 40, 50 years. So at minimum, we've lost all the productive, we're losing all the productive jobs. I think Susan could probably say more on this.
Well, I'm not going to say more. I'm going to let the labor secretary say more. This was her contribution at the cabinet meeting. Adam, is that
up here? Yeah, okay. Hold on.
Okay. Go.
Oh no, I'm getting another bug here. Can you add that to the stage, Susan? Can you click on that and add it to the stage?
I'm not sure I know how.
Just click on it. I'm gonna have to reload my page here if not.
Can you hear it?
No, I can't. Not until it's added to this. There we go. All right.
Okay, here we go.
Now play it.
All right. Let me just back up a half second.
And change the volume in the YouTube all the way up, please.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Workforce. And it's been under your leadership, Mr. President, that over 2 million jobs that has been created since you started have been native-born workers. And that is the difference between this presidency, this administration, as opposed to the Biden administration, where mostly foreign-born or federal government jobs. And I think through the private sector, over 2 million jobs of native-born. And so the Labor Department has wasted no time in putting that into action with our Make America Skilled Again, either grant dollars, but the intentionality of the apprenticeship program, 1 million active apprentices across this country. We have done over 250,000 new apprentices so far in the first year and registered over 2,000 new apprenticeship programs. Why do we need the apprenticeship programs with the men and women in the trades? Because of the leadership of onshoring and reshoring, and have a lot of these companies reinvest in America. We have to build this country. We cannot do that without the tradesmen and women and the craftsmen of this country. And I think that, Howard and I, we talked about that from the beginning, and we're going to have to lean in on that because we need the labor force, 700,000 new skilled jobs with electricians, construction workers, machinists, and so forth. And as I traveled with the vice president.
So there's your answer.
Thank you. Yeah, somebody in the chat who watched it said the cabinet meeting was brilliant. Yeah, Spitfire 33, the entire cabinet meeting was brilliant. Thank you. All right, qualified workforce. So no, we don't have enough qualified. Our workforce isn't qualified. That's gonna take a generation or two to really correct. All right, let's see here. Okay, let's continue on this economic theme here. This is a longer question, but I'm going to summarize it. But this is a continuation of a question that we had a week or two ago. Just a comment from the Q&A 2 weeks ago regarding the furniture tariffs, where businesses are passing on the costs. I understand Trump wants furniture manufacturing to come back to the United States. My son was at his local golf pro shop at a country club, and they were marking prices up for goods. When he asked management why, they replied, tariffs. When he pointed out that the goods were already in stock, the store employee fumbled around with another excuse and tariffs again. It's the same with gasoline. When the price per barrel goes up, almost immediately the price at the pump goes up, but drops slower when the price per barrel goes down. Are some companies not all hiding behind tariffs to price gouge and raise the baseline price of their products? Quickly, for imported goods, isn't the tariff collected at customs? Yes. Okay, another thing I've noticed is project packaging. Yeah, this is the thing, this shrinkflation. Everyone's discussing this. This has been going on for at least a decade or more, but it's really getting crazy now. I recently purchased the top brand of cocoa powder. The old can was 8. The new package is 6. Same with the package of donuts. Used to get at least 18. Now it's 13. Okay, so I guess the question is, are some companies not all hiding behind tariffs to price gouge and raise the baseline prices of their products? It's all maddening. We agree, Carolyn. Thank you for your question and comment.
I don't have any doubt that's going on. Basically, as this proceeds and we see what happens with the Supreme Court in terms of tariffs, I think the administration increasingly is going to get on top of this. The biggest problem that we have, quite frankly, is the level of concentration and consolidation of various things at this point, like the cartels in agriculture. We're in a situation where the next step is that we're going to have to basically take some antitrust action and get things back into the type of situation where you actually have competition. But, what's going on with farming and agriculture at this point is, everybody gets paid for producing soybeans. But the basic things we used to grow here are in one kind of doldrums or another. And so we got to really look at that from a physical economic standpoint and figure out what we do with farmers, what we do, across the supply chain, really. And it helps if people think about, the economy, not in terms of the stock market, but in terms of what we used to call a bill of materials. Just look at, what we used to call a worldwide cup of coffee. Where does your cup of coffee come from in the morning? What goes into it? How does it get here? And begin tracking out each of those kinds of physical things, and you'll understand how we got into this really crazy state that we're in, where we don't make anything. As Scott Bessent said the other day, the fundamental thing we're doing here is we're reclaiming our sovereignty away from this globalist economy, where everything is based on a production chain which we don't control.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you start looking at all of the devices and goods and things, right? All these things that we use, the supply chains that we once used to have in the United States, not just the chip manufacturing itself, but all of the related industries that we used to have in the United States surrounding the production of these devices and semiconductors. All of that. Now, there are a few still key players in the United States on certain parts of the process, but we've given up so much of our supply chain on the chip manufacturing, semiconductor manufacturing process. We have to bring all that back. We're going to have to begin a long process of bringing all that back to the United States. All right, so next question here. All right, let's start going to some of the more trickier questions here. Not trickier, but some of the unfortunate stuff we have to deal with sometimes. Okay. Thank you, Rich, for raising this. I've been hearing that Trump is being controlled and he's not being guided like we all thought. Hearing of Susie Wiles not being the patriot we were told and grave problems with her. Is this a concern to our movement? And what can we do? Thank you, Rich, for your question and comments. These are the kinds of questions and comments we receive regularly.
I think we can look at what Donald Trump is doing and, not get caught up in media gossip in terms of this person's a bad person, that person's a bad person. My reference point is very simple. Is he delivering on his intention, as that Monroe Doctrine statement said, to defend the United States from the globalists? Look at his actions. Don't sit there and, in a dollhouse. This is a good doll. That's a bad doll. Somebody on social media said Susie Wiles is controlled by the, Zionists. And I'm sure we're going to get to that question too. Look at what he's doing and make your judgments from the standpoint of what he's doing. Now, in the course of this 11 months, there have been a couple of times when I kind of went gulp and didn't understand what he was doing. Like, frankly, when he bombed Iran, I said, holy crap, are we about to start another forever war?
The same thing's happening with Venezuela too, right? It's going to be, we're going to look at it 6 months and then say, wow, that was the right action.
Right. And, but you sort of, I think I've learned over the last 11 months, take a breath. Let's see how this thing plays out. And so far, he has done nothing to violate the things that I voted for him for. So, gossip about his staff is meaningless in my book. Somebody asked, who is Susie Wiles? She's his chief of staff. And when he was actually addressing the Saudi American Investment Forum, he called her the most powerful woman in the world. I don't know if Barbara wants to add anything.
Yeah, I do. Look, the way intelligence operations work in terms of groups is exactly this. All right. You basically set up based on surveillance, based on profiles. You set up conflicts within groups, and you feed those conflicts so that people lose their focus. This cabinet, which everybody thought performed brilliantly. If you think about it, it's functioning very well. There's no leak. There are very, very few leaks, except by existing enemy agents. What are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a Washington, D.C., its intelligence community, and its Congress, which for 50 years have been systemically corrupted. All right? That's what Trump came in to dismember. People are now saying, well, I don't see people in cuffs yet. Well, you got to win the damn cases. How are you going to do that in D.C.? All right, D.C., the juries are so polluted by TDS that, essentially what will happen if you put a case before a jury, if you walk, James Comey down the aisle in cuffs and you put him before a D.C. jury, they'll basically acquit him. That's what will happen. And people will feel powerless. Better that you actually do something potent, like get him shunned by everyone in the world, than to try and bank on a conviction in either D.C. or, with all due respect, the Eastern District of Virginia, which is equally polluted. Where are you going to try him? All right, that becomes the issue of putting together a case. You got to win those cases. If you don't win those cases, you lose all credibility. And, now we're talking about we're going to put together, a major conspiracy case. That's great, but you got to put it into the types of bite-sized pieces that actually doesn't result in a 4-year trial where the defense basically has the options. I've been on the other end of a RICO case. The advantage is to the defense. All right, you got to actually, think about these things a little bit and trust people a little bit in terms of what it is we're confronting. All right. And, we're confronting something that's got to be taken apart and bulldozed, but it requires everybody out there to think on the level of, I'm the person who's got to do this bulldozing. How do I do it? All right. And then you're going to find out that you have much coherence with what the president is actually doing if you really think it through.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. I want to give a quick shout out to Jeff in Utah. Thank you very much, Jeff, for joining us every week. Great job. Please keep it up. Your job will get harder the more attention you get. You know what, Jeff? I've reflected a lot on this question. I think your comment there should be refined just a little tiny bit. The job doesn't really get harder. What happens is you begin to reach new challenges as you reach new levels. So the types of challenges that you're going to face in any process, whether it's growing on YouTube, growing on social media, trying to build any kind of business, the challenges you face at the beginning of your business are different than the challenges you face at the next steps of accomplishment. So I don't think it's any harder. It's just as somebody who's trying to grow a process, you really have to understand that the game changes as you grow. And it's your ability to see that game changing, or maybe a new opportunity opening up and being able to go to that new opportunity. That's the challenge, is not seeing that the game is changing. That's why it seems to get harder. So thank you for your support, Jeff. Thank you for coming back with us here every week. Please make sure you share this stream with your friends and family. That really helps us a lot. Okay, so I'm going to take another really edgy question, right? Because we get so much of this, and not to address it, I think you have to address a little bit of this. I listened to MTG's reasons for her resignation. Can you explain, if it is true, why Donald Trump wanted to primary her, and what caused the loss of one of his greatest supporters? Do you see any possibility of a reconciliation? Thank you, Bill. Thank you for your question. Really quickly, I think, yes, there is a possibility of reconciliation. but it's going to be a real reconciliation, kind of what Trump and Elon Musk are working out after Elon kind of, I think, recognized that he was going a little bit too crazy. So I do think there's a possibility of reconciliation. Barbara and Susan, what are your thoughts?
I don't really want to, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff going back and forth, which I could dwell on, like the fact that, she's got, as Stephen Miller's wife put it, a problem with the fact that I'm the center of the universe. And she was constantly blowing up the president's phone. And, basically, the line coming out of the White House is that really we had other things to do at that point other than manage one member of Congress. So, I think it's possible to reconcile, but, like a lot of people in Congress, she's not really looking out for the president. And she's not really looking out for, she's got to, people get into what I call kind of a reverse or attempted reverse Trump derangement syndrome. I have to prove that I'm not a member of the cult by being independent. All right. I'll basically put it that way. And I think that's part and parcel of, what's going on here. It largely devolved around the Epstein business, which Trump was largely not in favor of originally, because I think he was very concerned about the fact that he thought those files had really been tampered with. And there's no reason why he shouldn't think that, given all the phony evidence that was actually produced against him during the entire period from 2015 forward. And he, basically, I think that was part of the reason, for his opposition. The other side of it is that the congressional thing of actually saying these things should be declassified, in my view, is virtually toothless at this point. It's all performative. It basically exempts any classified information. And the only thing I'm interested in, since I know all about Jeffrey Epstein's sexual perversions and what that was about, I think, is I'm really interested only in what were the intelligence, community links to this situation. And that's what's been classified, and that's what we're not going to find out. I point out constantly that British banking and, intelligence operations, I think, are at the center of this whole business. If you just take Morgan Guarantee Trust and just Staley, who was the head of their wealth management, personal banking thing for the oligarchs. All right. That to me, he's a key Epstein guy. What was Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan Chase doing, not reporting over $5 billion in suspicious transactions until after Epstein killed himself? Good question. Did it have to do with child trafficking? I don't really think so. Or blackmail? I don't really think so. I think it has to do with intelligence operations, which people are kind of desperate to conceal, and the House and Senate bill to release these files leaves them classified.
Yeah, and I want to add another go at the MTG thing from a slightly different standpoint. It was pointed out to me by the author Richard Poe when we were doing an interview together that she has long been one of the advocates for what she calls national divorce. That is, the blue states and the red states are completely irreconcilable, and we're going to have to bust up the United States. And that, how she comes to that conclusion, honestly or through some other means, is a reflection of the problem you have with a layer of these people, which is at best they're disruptors, but they don't have any. So when we were up against nothing but globalists, which was a system that needed to be disrupted, they're fine. But when it comes to, okay, how are we going to rebuild the country? What is a positive approach? And the idea that there's an irreconcilable difference between the red and the blue states, Donald Trump doesn't believe that. He believes that if he can start delivering genuine economic prosperity across the board, many of these divides are going to be bound up, just sort of like Abraham Lincoln said at the end of a Civil War. So I think you have a problem. A couple of people in the chat mentioned Rand Paul and Thomas Massie, being a similar problem. And it comes from the same standpoint. They're libertarians. They have no concept of a positive conception of how the American system of political economy works, that your government in the context of that system of sovereignty and economic growth has a role to play. It doesn't have to be an overweening role, but it has a positive role to play, as we're seeing with this Trump administration channeling investment into productive activities. So you have a layer, and I think it was Jeff Childers who writes the Coffee and COVID Substack piece, which is something that I will recommend. He's the one who came up with this idea of the disruptors versus the builders. And I think it's a very important concept. We can get into the connectos. Is MTG getting money from somebody bad? I don't know. I haven't looked. But is that the only way this ever works? No, more often than not, it works where the way they think is what has been corrupted, not necessarily their pocketbooks.
Thank you. So I want to give a quick shout out to Carol Sunday. Thank you very much for your super sticker. I wish they showed up here in my software, but they don't. Thank you. Thank you very much for the support. Promethean Action, we are basically completely viewer and reader funded. So we super appreciate your super sticker donation. I want to take this question real quick before I continue, because I think this is an important question that we just haven't gotten a lot of news about, so it doesn't come into our minds, but it's super important. Thank you, Adventures One. Do you guys believe that the Supreme Court will uphold tariffs or shoot it down? Any thoughts? Thank you very much. Barbara, any thoughts?
I don't know. I can't predict from oral arguments, having done it myself lots of times with appeals courts and appeals oral arguments, and you walk out feeling either completely depressed or elated from the argument, and then the court does something totally different than what you thought, because it's a process. They deliberate, and somebody's got to put together a majority opinion here which actually sticks, and they've got to be mindful of how it's going to actually come down in history, whether they're setting a new precedent or not. And a lot of things which Trump is doing are not really capable of resolution in a legal system, which basically depends mostly on custom and past usage. He's doing revolutionary things. So if they shoot it down under the emergency which he's declared now, the basic argument which is being made is there wasn't any emergency. Oh yeah, we had like 100,000 of our people being killed every year by fentanyl. We had basically, a situation in which our economy was completely controlled by outside powers. Our elections were being rigged. It just wasn't an emergency, right? I mean, we didn't have any fundamental things we need to continue living ourselves. We have no pharmaceuticals here. We're dependent on China, which COVID should have actually taught us something in terms of all of that. So that wasn't an emergency. That's the way the argument goes. They had just been here for 40 years. So therefore, there's no way you could say it was an emergency. I think that just requires a completely different way of thinking. I think that's what the administration argued. If it gets shot down on the basis that there wasn't an emergency, I think you can make it stink with the population in terms of what we're actually coming through. But I also think he has got a lot of alternatives to use on the tariffs if this particular, quick remedy gets shot down.
Thank you very much. And Bill Vickers, Christmas treats for the corgis. Thank you, Bill, for your support. I know I keep saying this, but in my mind, I still have a design that I'm going to do eventually that's going to have Barbara and her corgi. We'll have it. We'll release it on a sweatshirt. So I haven't forgotten about it. It's, I have so many things. I'm like a one person machine. But yes, thank you so much for your support. Make sure you share our stream with all of your friends and family. Thank you. Okay, so let's continue on this issue of Congress as a whole. So thank you very much, Pauline. Thank you, longtime supporter here. If the Republicans don't understand what President Trump is doing, why doesn't he have a private meeting with them? Or at least with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson? Thank you very much, Pauline, for your question. So is it really that simple for President Trump just to sit down with the Republicans and have a private meeting? Is that really going to fix everything?
No.
I think he has those private meetings frequently, from what I understand. He's always,
he probably beats the bejesus out of them, knowing Donald Trump. No, this is really a question of creating more political power and more political intelligence. Look, honestly, there are probably not probably. There are Republicans who are totally MAGA. They love Donald Trump, and they don't understand how the economy works. So they get their panties in a bunch over, deficits and debt ceilings and so on, because they don't understand the American system. Now, are some of them educable? Well, we certainly tried, and we will continue. People may remember back in early October, we sent a team of nearly a dozen organizers from all over the country, California, Michigan, Texas, Florida, to Washington, D.C. They spent an entire week on Capitol Hill, meeting with and educating staff. They had scores, if not hundreds. They had scores of substantive meetings and hundreds of meetings. We're maintaining our relationship with many of those offices, and our biggest challenge is educating them. So the support that all of you are giving for Promethean Action helps us to actually do that project. That being said, it's my humble estimate, and I'm on the ground organizing politically in the state of Michigan, so I know the state of play in terms of candidates and so on and so forth. We are 1 to 2 to 3 election cycles from actually having a competent MAGA Congress. And whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 is very much up to you and the organizing that you do. Because the fundamental question is, when you have a citizens movement which knows what it's talking about, that can wield more power than the donor class and the consultants. And that's an ongoing fight. And you're at different states of play in different parts of the country, but it really all comes back to you.
okay, thank you, Susan and Barbara. We've gotten some very, very nice super chats that have come in. First, I'd like to thank, I think it's Janisha Moro or Janice Moro. Thank you so much. YouTube, I'm going to cheat over here. YouTube told me this is your first stream. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you so much for the support. I saw your super sticker. So the super sticker was a really cute picture of a corgi. So Barbara's the one that has the corgis.
I have a red pickup truck.
So thank you very much for the support. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. This is a live broadcast we do every Thursday morning, but we also have 3 political updates Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and theoretically, YouTube should give you notifications, but it doesn't always. So make sure you at least subscribe to our YouTube channel, and the link for our newsletter is in the description. So thank you very much, and welcome to the Promethean Action family. I'd also like to give a quick shout out to Dan Peters. Thank you very much for the super chat. If this is your first time tuning in, please make sure you're subscribed. We appreciate it. And if you ever have any questions for us, get our email newsletter, and you can reply to any one of our emails, and it'll come into our system if you want to make sure we see something or read something. So please consider getting our email newsletter. All right, so I'm going to say, I think Grunt82, I think you have a different YouTube account. I'd like to thank you. I didn't know who Sebastian Cavett was, but I literally just went. I do look like him. Okay, I understand that. I'm spreading the Promethean gospel, and I agree with Susan, money corrupts, but it can also bring bridges. And I agree. No, without money, you can't accomplish anything. You can't trade. You can't really exchange anything with anyone, right? The problem isn't necessarily the money. It's what you're spending your money on. What are you deploying the money to do? So yes, while money can be very corrupting, people spend it on terrible things. And that's what corrupts you. There's other ways money can corrupt you, but yeah, it's absolutely true. But at the same time, if you want to do something awesome in the world, like really awesome, you're going to need awesome amounts of money to do it at some point. So I agree. It also can build bridges. Thank you for, I think your name's usually Ura. Thank you very much for tuning in every week. Okay. So Bill Vickers, again, I have a red Solo cup. Okay. Thank you very much. I don't have one right now. I have this soda water. So thank you very much. Okay. Yes, so we also have a merch store. I think the link for a merch store is in the description if you want to pick up a coffee cup. Also, I have this Einstein t-shirt, Stay Creative. This is also in the merch store. If you click the link, there's a link for our merch store in the description here. Okay, I'm going to take another question here on Congress. This is something that was slightly near and dear to my heart because I did follow Brandon Herrera. And I know Brandon almost beat Mike Johnson in Texas, right? So I wanted to know if Barbara or Susan, you guys heard about this. There was a big YouTube channel named Brandon Herrera. I think it was in Texas 7th or Texas 8th, something like that. And he has one of the biggest gun tubers, but he built up an amazing following and almost beat a Trump, one of the people that one of these old Republicans, Tony Gonzalez, and Trump sided with Gonzalez instead of Brandon Herrera. I think what's going to happen, I think Brandon should continue to run. He has a great personality. He's a really good person. And I think what Trump needs to see is that Trump's waiting for one of these people to actually beat his selected candidate. And I think that's what Trump's waiting to see. It's not that he doesn't want these people to win, is that they literally have to show that they can win. And that's the reason why I'm beginning to think that Trump is selecting some of these bigger name candidates, because that's the way you have to win sometimes. You have to show that, hey, even though this is the guy that Trump selected, that I actually have more power than that. So I think Brandon can actually get there because he has a very good YouTube personality. I can tell. I followed a little bit of that. So Barbara or Susan, any thoughts on this process? Because that happened a bunch of times. We had these good people that were running, but then Trump goes around and selects, the big name candidate.
Well, I'll just say, look, Trump is dealing in a real world right now, which isn't perfect. He must hold the House and he must hold the Senate in the midterms. And it is a question of, there might be a person who more aligns with the MAGA outlook in a district where they're not going to win this round. So, I mean, this is a question of building a capable movement, building a bench, but doing it within the framework that Donald Trump has to hold the Senate and the House. And I'm going to tell you right now, in order for that to happen, there's going to be some Republicans that you don't like who win. And, it's part of this political evolution where we're focused on creating a much more in-depth bench of candidates who, whether it's this year or the next round, you actually have competent MAGA people, and Adam did say this, who can win. That's hard. It takes a lot of hard work. And again, it comes all back to what you all are doing.
Here, we have another one. Jamie from New York. If this is your first time tuning in, like I said, please make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for this wonderful education information. I watched the video, True History of the USA, from your website. Wow, what an eye-opener. Now I understood what they taught me in college is false. Jamie, I want to say something. It's very tricky. You know, it's not always necessarily what they taught you in college is false, is that they taught you one thing out of a huge historical issue, right? And that's I feel like so much of the problem is that people get locked into these very rigid patterns of thought. They think, oh, this is the way history happens. And really history, if you're a real student of history, there is a certain amount of, you have to go and follow all the pathways. You have to look at what the side was actually, you have to look at what the opposite side is doing. You have to look at what their reason, why the other side did what they did. You have to investigate that reasoning. And too often in schools, they'll only show you one side. Well, this is the side that's right, and we don't have to worry about all these other things that happen. So I'd say that's the way I would look at the world as you move forward and discover new things. Barbara, Susan, any thoughts on this one here?
No, not really.
Okay. We have another one here from Stephen Montplaisir. Thank you very much. God bless. Keep going. Thank you so much for the support. Like I tell everyone, please make sure you're subscribed to our channel. We do 3 political updates a week plus this live show, and we have a free newsletter. Links in the description. Here's the one from Carl Centers. Thank you very much, Carl, for joining us every week. Is there a list of who we should vote for in Michigan elections, judge, reps, governor, and so on? If so, where can we find it? Maybe we'll start curating that.
That's something we're going to have to be working on. And of course, there's going to be 2 layers to this. There'll be the primaries, and there'll be the general election. In some cases in Michigan, Carl, the judges are nominated at party conventions. So you won't, unless you're a delegate, you won't have a chance in that process. But it's absolutely the case, I know this, that you have races, especially where you have races where they're nonpartisan, like judges, where we vote for judges here in Michigan. Not all states do that. You have no idea who the Republican judges are. So, you know, I guess you throw darts at your ballot to figure out who to vote for. Yeah, we will do what we can to help guide people through the various steps of this.
Yeah, so Carl, just keep an eye out on our emails. I'm pretty sure you're on our email list. Hopefully you'll see something like that coming out. We'll definitely send it out.
Carl, if you want to just email us directly so that we know you outside of YouTube here, I'll make sure that if you're not already, you're getting our Michigan specific material.
Yeah, Susan maintains a special Michigan specific list. I know I've seen him in my work. He's just make sure you reach out to us and we'll put you on that email list that Susan has. I'd like to give a shout out here to the super chats just keep coming. Thank you, everyone. Kitten Magic. Please get our free newsletter if you haven't yet already. I know so many people say we send too many emails. Okay, we're sending you at least one a day. You can filter out our emails and put them into a special section so you can always get them. But we're also, it's in my hopper of things to do. I'm thinking about doing a weekly digest, because we are getting more and more people that are saying, hey, the daily is just too much. So I'm working towards getting a digest format set up, but for right now it's daily. Kitten Magic, please consider getting our free emails. And PGK Dan, thank you very much for joining us. Great content again. I think you're making an impact. I'm happy to have the means to offer this small support. May God bless you all and prosper in your efforts. Thank you very much, Dan. I hope you would somehow get active. You know, getting active could mean something as simple as talking about a historical topic that you just learned about with a family member. It could be something as simple as that. It could be taking your friends that usually talk about sports and all this other stupid things that people talk about and say, hey, did you guys know what Trump's actually doing? Here's a website that shows you the trillions of dollars of investment that Trump is bringing into the United States. Doing small things like that, bringing small things like that into your life over time is what it means to be an organizer. And over time, doing small things, you'll begin to see your influence reverberating in other people, and that'll raise your confidence. So I hope that we might also inspire you to start that same process. So thank you very much, PGK Dan, for your support.
Adam, actually, I'm going to bounce off of that because I do want to show people what influence we are actually having. Those of you who have been on our shows before know that we've produced a half-page flyer. This is the front side of it, which you can get on the Promethean PAC website. Adam can throw a link up to that. We have a political action committee, which is separate from Promethean Action. So the political action committee is what has produced this half-page flyer, which, as you can see, says, there it is, a new Republican Party is rising. Main Street, not Wall Street. It quotes from the Republican Party platform of 2024, which says we're returning to our roots as the party of workers, industry, infrastructure, producers, and so on. The back side of this pamphlet, I got to flip through a couple of pages to get it here, details the difference between the new Republican Party and the old Republican Party, and really the Uniparty, because it includes both the old establishment Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Now, we produced this months ago. Hundreds of people have ordered copies of this from Promethean PAC. You can get 100 copies for $23, and it goes up from there, are circulating it around the country. Now, to get back to the impact that we're having, this has been our song. We have been singing this song. It's a new Republican Party. Now what I want to do is play for you a couple of minutes of an interview that J.D. Vance did. Let me share again. Share screen. And let me make sure I have the right one. No, that's not it. There it is. And see if this sounds a little bit familiar. Adam, can this be seen?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
So let me say a few things, Matt. So first of all, I think that part of what you see as division in the Republican Party is a consequence of this realignment. We have a new governing coalition. We have a new political coalition. We have people who didn't used to vote Republican. And frankly, they have different preferences sometimes on certain issues than maybe the Ronald Reagan or George W. Bush Republican Party did. I think the Donald Trump Party is a fundamentally new phenomenon in American politics. I think that it can govern the country successfully for the next generation. But some of those divisions you talk about are just the natural outgrowth of the fact that we've got a lot of working class voters who frankly don't care what was Republican orthodoxy 25 years ago. And so they're pushing the party in a different direction. And again, I think that that debate is natural and normal, and it's something that we should frankly lean into, recognizing that the far left is really the problem that we have to confront in this country. The second thing that I'll say.
So I truly believe that the impact that we've had in circulating this question that it's a new Republican Party, it rejects the orthodoxy of George Bush, is taking hold in terms of the messaging of this administration. It needs to take hold more as you get down the political food chain to the state levels and the local levels. So that's my pitch for the impact that we're having, and encouraging all of you to get copies of this half-page flyer and magnify our impact.
Yeah, just a quick thing. So I don't have a copy of it here, but the flyer itself is about this big. If Susan has one, it's about half a sheet of paper. If you go to the link right there or the QR code, they go to the same place. If you go there, sorry about the webpage, it's a little bit jumbled. I'll clean it up. But about through the bottom of the page is a link to download a black and white version. So you can print these up in a black and white version for free if you want. But then we also have a link on that website to get the color copy prints. And so if you're interested in getting our leaflet here, which is a great icebreaker, when I was talking to PGK Dan a moment ago, a super chat, right? These are the kinds of things, these are the kinds of issues that the media is not talking about. And these types of things like bringing back the manufacturing. Actually, Trump doesn't want to get rid of Social Security or Medicare. He wants to get rid of the waste and all the fraud, but he doesn't actually want to get rid of it. If you actually go to his quotes, right? Not the idiot Republicans in Congress, but Trump himself, right? So this is a great conversation starter for people, and there's like no propaganda on it. We literally took from Trump's direct policies himself. Okay, so I'm going to give a quick shout out here. It's a thank you, none of your biz. Okay, none of your biz. Thank you very much. God bless you too, brother or sister. Thank you for the support. Please make sure you subscribe to our channel. Like I said, 3 political updates a week plus this live one. You don't want to miss it. Okay, so we still have. Everyone, I just want to say we get so many questions, like a ridiculous amount of questions, and we're very sorry if we don't get to yours. One of the things that's helpful to us actually is if you kind of make your questions not so long. Some people like cram 20 questions into a long thing, and that just makes it really hard for us to address a little bit. Let's see here. Yeah, okay, Susan, yes, I'm gonna take that in a moment. I'm going to continue here with the rest of the questions. So I just want to say we're not ignoring it. We do see every single question that you send in. So even if we don't answer your question, know that it is in our minds. We might answer it maybe in one of our shows or in next week's thing. But we do get all of your messages you send, and we do take a look at them all, even if we can't reply to every single one. Okay, next one here. Let's take this because I think this is an important thing because Bannon does talk about this all the time. Okay, so Steve Bannon saying he wants Trump to have the 3rd term is scary. Is this something that can actually happen? I would rather he abide to the Constitution and really mentor and teach J.D. Vance's economic plans and his peace and negotiation skills, and maybe make a Vance Rubio area. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you for your long-time support. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I know Steve Bannon talks about that. I think he wants clickbait, to be perfectly honest. I mean, Trump, has said repeatedly that he obviously doesn't think he can do it. It'll very much depend upon what kind of shape he's actually in at the end of this 4 years and what he really wants to do. And I think, basically he's doing a pretty good job of mentoring JD. That's why they're attacking JD so thoroughly at this point in time. He's become almost as much of a target on social media as Trump himself is. So, I think a lot of this stuff is kind of, I want to pay attention to what's actually going on, which to me is the most substantial question, and stop niggling about every single damn little thing, which a lot of these people on social media are really out there to do. He's not doing this. He's not doing that. He's being set up. I see it. Okay. How about we actually go out and educate our fellow Americans about what he's actually doing and about the real forces that he's confronting? That's scarier than sitting in a pilot seat and actually saying, well, I have this opinion or that opinion, or, I really think this or that. Go out and organize. You'll find out, what is important and what's not by your ability to help change your fellow human beings.
Yeah, that's actually a very good insight, Barbara. I agree with you. Even great scientists, you develop all these theories in your head about what's going to happen, what the outcome of the experiment's going to be. Even some very educated ideas about what the experiment's going to do. But at the end of the day, until you try and put that thinking into practice, it's purely just living in this hypothetical world, right? So I think that's important. It's when you try to take your ideas to a wider audience, when you try to influence others and say, hey, I actually have a unique idea here that you should listen and take heed to. It's when you try and do those things that it will become more clear about what the most important things are right now. So thank you. Thank you very much, Barbara, for that question. I'll blast this one from Yolanda. Thank you very much for your support, Yolanda. I think we already answered this one. How do people convey the urgency, the dialogue the Republicans need to begin and to logically persuade voters? Okay, I just say a quick thing here. I don't think you're going to persuade anyone with logic. The way that you have to, the way that you're going to change people is through inspiration, right? Inspiration is a much more emotional concept. There's an emotion and a human emotion involved in the act of inspiration. Logic has none of that, right? The goal of logic is to remove all of that human emotion, all that messy human stuff, right? Logic, I like mathematics a lot, so I'm speaking a little bit here from what I know. The goal of logic is to remove all of that emotion, all that human messiness, right? To return it to this machine kind of argument. You're never going to change anyone with a logical argument. There's a certain amount of emotional activation. And then at the end, the way that you really want to activate somebody's emotions is through inspiration. That's one of the highest forms of human emotion. So I would say, I think that's where I would go. But this next one is the one I wanted to get to. And this is in the same vein, but I think a lot of people of our audience, because we do have an older audience, I think this is actually an important question. Some older citizens in my area are so disillusioned and distrustful that they don't believe anyone. One person said she would rather move to another country. How can we encourage them to support President Trump when they hear bewildering reports and accusations about things like military action against Venezuela and other scary situations? Thank you upwards for the question and comment. Barbara, Susan, what are your thoughts? Because I think these are baby boomers that are, 68ers that are just have their brains shook so much,
Yeah, I mean, there's, you do have to, I think, look at two layers of boomers. There's one thing about boomers, or this older gen, I'm a boomer, so I'm not using it pejoratively. This older generation that people need to be conscious of when you're thinking about organizing, because what Adam was saying a few minutes ago, it's subjective. You can't pound people over the head with facts if it won't work. Boomers, I'll get back. Two layers of boomers. First of all, boomers actually grew up in a society which more or less worked. We had a functioning economy in the 1950s, especially if you grew up in a blue-collar area like I did. You had the kind of jobs where one income could raise a family, whether it was my neighbor's dad who was a TV repairman or most of my neighbors who worked, at auto factories and so on. You had a stability, you had a sense of an improving future. You looked at your kids and you figured, well, I worked on the line. Maybe he'll end up as a manager. Maybe he'll end up as an engineer. Maybe he'll end up as a scientist. You had an optimistic outlook that was deliberately taken away through the rock, drug, sex counterculture, through a complete social engineering psy-war operation run against the younger generation. And it started with the assassinations of the Kennedys and Martin Luther King, the flooding of the country with recreational drugs, and the destruction of our culture, and endless wars. So when you're dealing with an older generation, all I can give is two pieces of advice. One is there a way you can get that person to remember what a society looked like when it worked? In other words, have they not rejected that? Now, some of the 68ers, people who went radical, they may have rejected it. That's a different problem and possibly a relatively fruitless problem at this point. But can you get people just thinking in terms of a functioning society? Talk about things like the skilled workforce, the fact that we're giving there. I mean, this is amazing what the labor secretary said. 1 million skilled apprenticeships, of which they've already filled 250,000. 250,000 young people are on their way to getting good paying, stable jobs where they can raise a family. Or the other things that Peter Navarro, for example, is talking about in terms of what actually causes inflation. Why did you have inflation in eggs versus why do you still have inflation in beef? We had inflation in eggs because you had the Great Chicken Massacre, by the Biden administration using bird flu. But you can rebuild a chicken flock in 45 days, which is why Trump was able to bring the price of eggs and the price of chicken down. Cattle is another problem. It's going to take 2 years in terms of rebuilding the herds. Doesn't mean you can have impact. So all I can say is if you can somehow initiate a discussion which pulls people into the real world of physical production, as opposed to the opinions of social media, you'll have a fighting chance. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, everyone, for the support here. I want to give a quick shout out to Jody Davis, Cuckoo Clock Artist. Am I seeing this right? There are 1,200 watching and 1,300 likes. Great job. Thank you very much, Jody Davis. You've probably been tuning in for a few times now. So we've definitely developed a very loyal audience, people that are coming back every week. They're watching our 3 live shows, coming to this, 3 pre-recorded political briefings plus this live show. But what we're especially trying to do is to break out into new audiences and to increase our reach in YouTube. So the way you can help us, Jody, do that, the actual secret to grow to YouTube channels that grow is that they have a dedicated audience of people that share their content. And the reason why sharing is important, because if you, let's say you share our video like through email or through SMS, if somebody watches our video and then continues to watch videos on YouTube, we basically helped YouTube bring more eyeballs onto YouTube. So the more people you can bring into our YouTube videos, that helps increase our reach. So help us reach that greater audience. Please share these videos with your friends and family. It really does help. All right, and this person here has been waiting for a while. Thank you for waiting, Bob. I'm going to take a question right now. How will Trump deal with the secessionist coalition confederacy of California, Oregon, Illinois, Minnesota, New York? Do you know about the new California statehood movement? Thank you very much, Bob Katz, for your question. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts?
Well, I tend to think if you look at his meeting with Zoran Mandami, you get a good sense of it. He can wield the power of the United States in terms of federal funding. And that's why, as opposed to the thriller in Manila fight, which most people were just waiting for on the internet, basically what happened was that Trump had Mandami actually eating out of the palm of his hand by the time the meeting ended. Why? Well, because New York happens to be, New York City, still the financial capital of the world. It happens to be a place dear to Donald Trump's heart. And, he's created a situation now with Mandami where if New York falls apart, it's not on Trump. It's on Mandami's failure and the failure of all of these crazy plans he had, which have nothing to do with keeping the city running and building it up. So I don't think we're at the point of, yes, we know about the new California statehood movement. Our wonderful people in California follow that. It exists on both sides, this kind of notion that you want to actually break up the republic in one form or another. It exists in the form of this crazy Democratic Party stuff. The Convention of the States on the Republican side is another way of talking about that. Marjorie Taylor Greene's national divorce is a similar way of talking about that. There are all these movements which essentially say, well, we don't agree, basically things are going to fall apart, so let's just go with secession and break the country up. That has been the plan of the British oligarchy ever since the Civil War. Think about that. All right, that has actually been the plan. If you can break the country down into these really balkanized units, which are readily and easily controlled, then essentially you've destroyed the power of the United States and the world. So I think the way he's going to deal with it is by raising his motto, and his thinking is, these are pessimistic movements. They're rooted in philosophical pessimism. They're rooted in negativity. They're rooted in nihilism, all of it. And if I can raise the economic level of the entire country, well, he says, a rising tide lifts all boats, even the boats of those who would like to be left behind in the Stone Age. So, essentially, I think that's his approach. That's the way he's going to deal with it. And clearly the Democratic Party is attempting to create a kind of panic in people where, secession is the only way to go if you can think about existing in the same country as Gavin Newsom. That thought repels me, but my deeper Abraham Lincoln side tells me that I better not become a rabid abolitionist, because that just plays into the enemy's hands.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. I have more shout outs here. People are really giving us some love today. Thank you, Mission Forward, for your support. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. We do this once a week, plus we have political briefings. Thank you so much. PSA, thank you. Martin Armstrong wrote the peace plan. Talk to him.
I seriously doubt that Martin Armstrong, he wrote a peace plan. And some of the parts of the peace plan are so obvious if you actually want peace. Anybody who's going to write a serious peace plan is going to end up with those parts. I appreciate his outlook on some things, but I will just counsel, his needle will tend a little too much toward that pessimistic side that Barbara was just addressing.
Thank you. And then we have one from Alabama. Thank you, Alabama, for joining us for another week. My eyes have never been so open. Without a doubt, it's the information I've learned by watching everything you three have posted on YouTube. Thank you so much for the truth. We all really needed it. Thank you. And bless you, Alabama. Thank you for the support. Like I said, one thing that you can do, two things you can do. One is simply just talk. And you don't have to be crazy about it. Just start talking about these issues more with the people around you. You don't have to be crazy about it. Just begin to put these ideas into other people's minds. The second thing that'll really help is, like I said, when a good high quality share is one of YouTube's greatest signals. When, let's say, somebody's browsing their email, they come across our video. Now all of a sudden they started a 2-hour YouTube rabbit hole because of our video. That's what YouTube really likes to see. So sharing our video to people that really want to watch it and having them watch the whole video and stay on the platform, that's what YouTube really likes. So you can share our video, always helps a lot. Okay, so I think we're getting close to the end here. Susan, Barbara, are there any topics that you want to cover here? Because I'm going to take a topic that I've been avoiding. I would like to take this topic, but maybe you want to do something else. I wanted to take the issue of Muslims and what's going on with this immigration stuff. And I think we have to talk about it because it's all over the news. We know it's something that's on everyone's mind. So I think I'm going to take a few questions on this here. So hold on for one moment. I'm going to load it up. Okay, number 13. Actually, maybe. Okay, you know what? I was going to start a different one, but let's start on this because it hits on the Mamdani thing too, which is very related. So I thank you, Miss Cody, for the question. So I just witnessed Zohran Mamdani as a guest in the Oval Office standing next to my beloved president. I must say this made me very queasy. Kind of felt like Satan himself was standing there. Please tell me that this is Trump playing chess and not being schmoozed. I worry a lot that he seems to be impressed by all these Islamic deceivers, even to the point of allowing them to have a military training base in a state that does not even have Islamic population. That was the thing with Qatar, I believe, right? Yeah. What is really going on? My Governor Abbott just labeled these people as terrorists, and now Trump is smiling and saying that he has a lot in common with Mamdani and that they want the same things for New York City. Thank you, Miss Cody, for the question and comment. Barbara and Susan, what are your thoughts? I think a lot of people have similar feelings.
Susan, you want to start?
I mean, Barbara addressed the Mamdani question. This is, Donald Trump is flanking these Democrats and saying, I'm going to give you an opportunity to succeed. And as Barbara said, if you fail, it's on you. It's not on me. But the larger question is a lot of the buzz things you've got in there, which are a creation of British psychological warfare, which has created a entire curriculum that all Muslims and Islam are deceivers, want to establish a caliphate, want to destroy the United States and every other sovereign nation, want to kill all the Christians. I'm telling you right now, it's not true. Now, if you want to say that about the Muslim Brotherhood, if you want to say that about ISIS, if you want to say that about Al-Qaeda, it is more or less true, because those are arms of British intelligence. And the purpose of that is to create a battering ram against civilization. Now, I'm sitting about 6 miles from Dearborn, Michigan, and I'm going to tell you right now, it is not being run by Sharia law. In fact, many of the Muslims who live in Dearborn, Michigan have been there since the 1950s, when you never even heard of any of this kind of stuff. Or as one of my Yemeni friends said, what is all this talk about Sharia law? Don't they know that that's why we left some of the countries we left to come to the United States, so we could get away with it, get away from this? This is an operation. Now, people probably saw the reports 3 weeks ago that there was a confrontation in Dearborn where a Republican gubernatorial candidate who had been sucked into all of this anti-Muslim Sharia law in Dearborn sentiment and so on and so forth, decided he was going to have a march in Dearborn. To his credit, he decided to go to Dearborn before he had the march and to walk into some mosques and to walk into some coffee shops and find out what was really going on. And he found out that he had been lied to. But what happened is outside agitators, people who have got long-standing ties, and Barbara might want to fill in some of the blanks on this, to these kinds of provocations, rented a bus and came up from Florida to turn this into a very, very ugly provocation in Dearborn, which, by the way, involved a small number of people on the provocateur side and an even smaller number of people who reacted to this. The purpose of this is to destroy the Trump coalition. The Trump coalition is not a religious movement. It's exactly what J.D. Vance said in that. It's blue-collar workers, it's producers who come together around the shared commonality of making this country great again and giving everybody the opportunity to prosper and to create a better life for their children. And it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or Presbyterian or Catholic or not any of the above, to be an American and to participate in this kind of process. And anybody who says anything to the contrary, whether it's the anti-Semitic side of things, and I'll say it again, you can be, anti-Semitism exists. That's different than being against the government of Bibi Netanyahu or being against the Zionists. But there is a genuine anti-Semitic movement being whipped up on one side, this anti-Muslim stuff, not anti-Muslim Brotherhood, anti-Muslim. If you're against the Muslim Brotherhood, I'm with you, brother. That's not the issue. We're talking about racial and religious warfare, which is being whipped up by the enemy inside the MAGA movement in particular to destroy the coalition that made Donald Trump president of the United States in 2025 and to prevent him from doing it, to prevent us all from doing it again in 2026 and in 2028. So that's what I would say about it. Barbara may want to chime in a bit.
Yeah, I think that this is the oldest British intelligence trick in the book. They're trying to start a religious war. And that way they actually can get away with, just look at the Middle East and think about that. There used to be what one would call sovereign nationalist governments in the Middle East. And between us and the British, we overthrew all of them. And we installed various forms of theocratic states throughout the Middle East. Because the idea was that if we can get all of the people who would otherwise be asserting their sovereignty, to actually control their own resources and so forth and so on, we control the world's oil supplies, which was the key issue at that point in time. And we have all of these people at war with each other all the time through religious warfare, which once it gets started, it's almost impossible to stop. That's why I think Trump's situation in the Middle East is truly miraculous. Very few religious wars, once started, have ever ended in history. Think about the Dark Ages, which is largely a result of religious warfare. And, basically we came out of that through the Peace of Westphalia, and the globalists like Tony Blair decided that we're no longer with the Peace of Westphalia, and we're going to do something else in terms of what we think about sovereign states. The Muslim population, I looked it up last night, represents about 1.24% of the US population. And people are saying, essentially that religious thing is going to take over the United States, like, the problem that you actually see going on in England, which is a kind of a different nature. That population is composed of, think about it, all the Black people who are associated with the Nation of Islam and the old movement around Malcolm X, which was actually built up in the United States, Louis Farrakhan, etc. That movement also consists of people like in Michigan and Dearborn, who've been here for 30, 40 years and are totally, completely integrated into the United States. You have a component which was created both by the United States and the British intelligence forces called radical Islam, originally by none other than Brzezinski for the Democratic Party, whose great idea was the way we're going to basically kill the Soviet Union is by staging a color revolution among all of the Muslims on their southern flank and draw the Soviet Union into Afghanistan. Okay, and they will be defeated by, what we characterize as the insurgent warfare, which was waged in Afghanistan. And in order to do that, we funded the United States, I'm sorry to say, and the British funded these Islamic radical movements, these jihadists, the radical political Islam, which has been a cult creation of British intelligence. And we funded all these people to go into Afghanistan to lure the Russians in, overturn what they were in Afghanistan and create a problem, which Brzezinski's idea was will kill Russia's southern flank because of its Muslim populations. That's how these things are used, all right? That's just a history lesson right then and there. The problem is that particular Brzezinski operation ended up with 3,000 American dead people on September 11, 2001. Asked about it, he said, what was more important, defeating the Soviet Union or riling up a bunch of crazy radical Islamists. Think about that. That was his statement about 3,000 Americans being murdered by an action of the state. Now, that's an entirely different issue than, what's going on with the indigenous Muslim population in the United States. And when you look at all of these people who have immigrated, I think Mike Benz has the best idea. Look at the operations which our country and the British have been doing in a lot of these areas. Look at this Afghani stuff. It's part and parcel of what I just told you about. I highly recommend 2 books, and I've been recommending them over and over and over again to our audience. One is called The Devil's Game, and it's by Robert Dreyfuss, Dreyfuss, How the United States Helped Unleash Fundamentalist Islam. And it gives you the whole history. The other is a very, very useful book by a gentleman by the name of Mark Curtis called Secret Affairs. And it deals with the entire British secret intelligence history with what is called radical Islam and the Muslim Brotherhood. That is entirely different than the populations we have here in the United States, which actually united to vote for Trump in places like Michigan.
All right.
I'm watching some of the things in the chat in terms of Muslims in Dearborn waking people up at 5 a.m. with prayers and not adhering to the Constitution. People, it's just not true.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. So I'd like to give a quick shout out to Gwen Young. Thank you for waiting patiently. I am Alberta. Thank you for our friends up north. You guys have some organizing to do up there to bring the best of America to Canada. It's going to take some time, but I think it is possible. Thank you very much for your support up north. Thank you for tuning in. The Redeemed Patriot, last second super chat. Thank you very much. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel here. Like I've said, 3 political updates a week plus this live show. And also, please make sure you get our free newsletter. The link is in the description. You can just search the web for Promethean Action. You'll find our website, get our free newsletter. And I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. The chat was awesome as usual. We're back on a regular schedule, so we'll be back this Saturday with our Saturday wrap-up. And thank you very much. We'll see you next Thursday. Take it easy.